Perhaps, in my estimation, the best way to explain myself to you and what my ambitions are is to tell you that we live in an incredible world, and it's magnificent, and it is extraordinary, and it is so underappreciated in this day of age which we pride ourselves in great accomplishments, technology, all of these things. We are leaving behind what we sustain ourselves with, the earth, the planet. It's very difficult to try to put this in a proper perspective in a world that's polarized by government, by political perspective. We lose track of what reality is. And so when you start talking, for example, about appreciating the world, you immediately form camps. You form the hippie camp, you form perhaps the organic camp, you form the people who are the Republicans. You know what I mean. You dissect the world into political aspirations or into purposes or motives. And this is probably the worst thing that we could do. What I really would like to say in this encounter with me tonight is that there's so much to appreciate that it doesn't matter how hard you work, your eye's going to be left wanting more. So that's what I am, an obsessed lover of the world's plans, but more purposely because I think that's what the future of humanity is going to depend upon. So when we start with my photographs, I've tried to give a purpose to them. First, let's give some inspiration, people who perhaps inspired characters like myself. Luther Burbank. Now, let me go down there and fix that. You're going to, when you're doing this, you're going to have to move just this way. View, full screen, okay. And then keep it right there, yeah. Okay. Okay, so Luther Burbank, of course, was one of the phenomenal plant of the last 2 centuries, an extraordinary genius, inspiration. This is something we need even today. Now, there's a man here, a friend of mine, Jim here, Jim Wade. We are working on a possible project together to discover the potential of an underutilized crop. Luther Burbank did this more than 100 years ago, and he had extraordinary results, and it still sticks with us today, whether they're pears, peaches, plums, whether they're the spineless opuntia cactus. There's the left imprint of a gentleman who was inspired. He wasn't necessarily science. Sometimes these people amaze me by just their feel for nature. I mean, how does, for example, Neil Peters, one of the unknown gentlemen of the fruit field, create new varieties of the pawpaw, Asmina triloba? He fills it, perhaps, or he just selects it. Okay, let's start moving here. This, of course, is George Washington Carver, the man who was inspired to find more than 1,000 purposes for the peanut. And then Nikolai Vavilov, who, of course, was the great father of the biodiversity perspective. He was later to die in a Siberian war camp. This is me. As Ron said, I started loving plants when I was a real little kid, probably about 6 years old here with my crookneck summer squash, Cucurbita peepo. The lady who I have to give credit to teaching me to learn, this is my mother. She used to beat me up when I was 2 years old and try to make me learn flashcards. She taught me ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. That's some biological statement. But what it got into me was a love at a very, very young age of what the world had to offer. Then this is my daughter, and she has been a real incredible tag-along isn't even a word. She's led some of the expeditions. Here we're down at Jim West Farm Retreat in Ecuador. Keep going, please. Here she is right here, overcome by flies in Djibouti. And here she's overcome by horse manure and cow manure in Ethiopia. And this is arena now. You know, so the glamour of all of this is why I'm enjoying wearing my suit tonight. Because in fact, I don't stay a lot of times in glamorous places. And this, if you go back arena, this was on the Haitian-Dominican Republic border, and this was the greeting to get into Haiti. And so, as you see, it was daunting to say the least. She didn't want to go.
And that's just the Customs Bureau there.
Here she is in, this would then be in Samoa with some very unusual forms of bananas. And this is a lady who I have to appreciate tonight too, because there's people you have to appreciate in life because they're the ones who make things happen. Jan Schwartz, will you please stand up? For those of you who are members of the Explorers Club, she was the one who sent the invitations out to all of you. Ron here, I already said great things about him. We can fly through these. Here with my little son, Demi. And here, the ever-present scholar, look at that, taking notes in a food store. This is what learning is all about. Always being a student. Now, other people who have helped form me, because you don't just gallivant around the world doing what I do without supporters. So this was one of my first supporters. His name is Ron Gass. He was from Mountain States Wholesale Nursery. The incredible man gave me a fiat to travel all over Mexico, paid all my expenses. He said, you just do something for us. Well, in the time that we worked for him, I introduced more than 80 species of agaves into horticulture in Phoenix in the Southwest. And he still is one of the gem human beings that I know on this planet. Here he is just a few weeks ago in Phoenix. This is another man who's really responsible for showing me that I could do work and make money being a seed collector. This is Steve Breck. He has one of the largest succulent collections in the world. He's in Mesa. He's actually in Belen, New Mexico, right south of Albuquerque. And this is a gentleman who is from Europe, who is one of my big supporters. He's funded expeditions all over the world for me. His name is Luke Rosen, and he has a huge cactus nursery, but he's also a man who's interested in agro investing and huge plantations and all of this stuff. So the practical aspect, there was a gentleman named John who asked me about moringa. And something to bring up is there's always somebody who's willing to be creative, willing to put their money where their mouth is, and it's people like this who make it happen. This is another presentation in Germany with him. Okay, now people who are extraordinary, and we'll go through this real quick. Steve Bassiola, there's very few people on this planet, I probably don't know some of the special ones, who I hold in such high regard as Steve. I mean, he just spent about 2.5 weeks with me in Armenia, in Georgia, and then he spent about 2 weeks with me in Oman. An incredible scholar. He is probably one of the foremost in the world when it comes to the knowledge of food plants, although him and I, we compete quite heavily when we're in our private domain. Here he is with Arena in a store in Los Angeles and classifying Cucurbita maxima, the big Hubbard squashes that we collected in markets all over Armenia. This is another gentleman, maybe you have heard of him or have not heard about him. He's Bruce French. He compiled a list of the world's food plants, useful plants, database. He originally started with the food plants of Papua New Guinea, and as it turns out, I met him this last summer at a conference which turned to be very controversial because I don't have all but friends, I have a lot of enemies too, and part of the reason is my message. My message is technology is not the perfect answer. It's not that I disdain technology, I'm not a neogenist, I'm not against technology, but if you don't know the first things about what's around you, you don't have a reason to start tearing genes apart and saying you're coming up with solutions. One of the debates which I would hope that would fall on me, and maybe it will be a blessing from God, maybe it will be somebody like Ron Huroff or Jan who sets it up, but it's Nina Fedorov. She's the science advisor for Hillary Clinton. Now you know, some of you, that she's also seems to be a port ghost for Monsanto because she says the only way for the future is genetically modified organisms. You put me in a room with her for 10 minutes and I'll have her crying because I assure you, without any insinuation of being mean, she doesn't know the field. These are some other heroes of mine. This is Jim West, who has a fruit farm. If any of you are really into tropical fruits, you must have heard of him. He lives as a semi-recluse on a 400-acre farm on the wayward side of Ecuador, right over the mountain from Quito, so he gets all the flush of moisture. Incredible collection of tropical fruit. Here he is, we're down at his ranch, his library, which is exposed to the humidity. This is the International Conference on Underutilized Crops in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Now you have to understand, this is a 5-star hotel. These are people who are solving the world's hunger problem. They come from all over the world to talk about 1.2 billion people go to bed hungry every night. And I became rather notorious there, to say the least. Some of the directors here. This guy, sitting pretty because he just won a prize-coveted award. The government of Malaysia, 40 million euros over the next 10 years to come up with 3 underutilized crops that can be turned into crops as valuable as the oil palm. So he feels really secure until I started asking him questions. Then he didn't like me anymore. This right here is just a little picture of biodiversity. These are roselle. This is Hibiscus sabdarifa, which is also known as Jamaica, the Jamaica drink, the red drink from Mexico. Just shows some of the diversity coming out of Chad and Niger and West Africa. This is Asplitia hardwigii compositaceae. These are the altiplanos of northern Ecuador. This is a part of the trade here. How do I get all these things around? Now, perhaps I'm exposing too much of myself, perhaps I'm overconfident, perhaps I'll be found out. But the reality is, a lot of the world still does this type of thing, just in natural movement. So I buy lots of foods. In this case, you see my coveted tubers, my Andean tuber crops. Now, there's something I want to change. And what I want to change may seem insane, because we have what's called the CBD, the International Convention on Biodiversity. That convention was originally established and set up in order to protect countries, protect the plants and the fauna that lived in them, but it was also considered to be something which would give some meaning and purpose to their protection. What happened is it became perverted. They started applying it to food plants, so much so that in the Andes, these tubers are now prohibited to be let out to other parts of the world. Why? Because they don't want to share them with the rest of the world. Now, my argument is simplistic, and you have to excuse me if it's not even intellectual, but if people in Africa eat corn, if people in Malaysia are using the oil palm to the tune of almost 2 million hectares of oil palms planted, which comes from Central African tropics, if people in Russia are eating potatoes, if people in North America are eating rice, these things don't originate from those places. So we already have a lot of spread around food. Why not all of it? And the reason I'm saying this is because food security demands diversity. It's not just because it's a cute idea, it's because it's reality. Disease resistance, ability to conform to diverse and adverse climates is all in biodiversity. Now there's an interesting story about this which allows me to go on, but there's an International Center for Potato in Lima, Peru. They are under United Nations fundings and grants. Turns out that they are also under a mandate to share this material with people all over the world. However, if you request this material from them, you won't get it because there's the overruling Andean Pact which prevents this material from being transferred. So even though they're being funded by the United Nations, they have autonomy because of their 3 or 4 country pact, which means it's literally absurd that the United Nations is funding them, but no one can access the material. I had PhDs. Now you're from Tennessee, Blake. Now, I don't know what your little story is right now about trying to access the germplasm for the material you're looking for. It has a little bit different application than food plant use. But one thing is for sure, scientists around the world are lamenting how much bureaucracy they have to go through to access material, even for primary research. They don't want to share it. Case in point, Namibia. They call it the National Gene Bank of Namibia. Ask for Tylosin esculenta. What is it? It's the marama bean. The marama bean is a spectacular legume that can produce a tuber up to 200 to 300 pounds. We don't eat it at that stage. We eat it when it's young and tender, maybe a year old. But it will grow in the most inhospitable of climates. Namibia is one of them. And it ends up being one of the most resilient legumes in the world that not only produces an edible tuber, can go 3 years without water once it's established, but produces a nut which rivals the macadamia nut. They didn't want to share it with me, but lucky for me, there was Dr. Powell in Alpine, Texas at Sul-Ross University who gave me seeds. I started propagating them. I started giving them to everyone I can. I'm a pusher for Tylosin esculenta. Okay, keep going. Now this is part of the rest of my life. Getting in dark and dirty places, worrying about snakes, worrying about leeches, all those type of things. It really sounds exotic. This right here is Brahia Moriae in Mexico. We're going to move through these quick now because there's 900 pictures. This is yucca, or actually this is a Bocarnia species. Then this is my brother, who is a very, very impressive botanical explorer himself. He's been wandering around the wilds of Vanuatu for 6 months. Bangladesh. This right here is my daughter, and the way I used to carry my son around with a flying net on him in Ethiopia. Ethiopia, Alicia again. This right here is with Jim West and Ellen Carl. Ellen Carl has what's known as the Botanical Arts, a huge fruit collection in northern, this was in Borneo this past spring for 5 days we were there. We'll go right through those if you know. Okay, this is down in the Copper Canyon in Mexico. And this was on a recent trip in July in Thailand, and we really got buried. Just go through quick. So these are the kind of things that make it really exciting. This is in Madagascar with Kelly Griffin. If any of you know Kelly, we were in Madagascar for 3 weeks in April. And this is another way to get around. Okay, this is down in Iseola, the plains. Now we're going to go through, the part of the title of this was a survey of geographical regions. So as you see, I really didn't prepare a talk. I'm going at this extemporaneously, but I've been practicing for a while, I should say. So here we'll look at Madagascar. The point in best focus is how much variation there is and what we can find in each location. Because one of the secrets that I believe to food security is mapping different regions, finding what kind of plants will grow in these regions, and then set up a recipe to grow. I can take Haiti, for example, and I can grow hundreds of crops in Haiti. They're not traditional crops, but they will feed people. And next week in Fort Myers, Florida, there's the Educational Concerns for Hunger conference, and I'll be giving a talk on edible tubers of the hot tropics, so deserts. Okay, we'll go through this relatively quickly. Some of it would just be scenic. Yeah, this is a spectacular little thing. These right here, this is probably a Vanguaria. I haven't identified the species. The photo was sent to me from my, my colleague. There's the fruit. It looks like a Vanguaria though. This is the Cucumis milo, just a melon, but these are most likely related to the fruit melons, giving a little bit about the ethnogeography of the area. Those probably originating from the Asian mainland, because they crack open. There's the town they were collected in. Just go through this quickly. Now these, the baobabs, the Adansonia, named after Addison, who was a Scottish explorer and botanist. As it turns out, the Adansonias are most famous for the baobab tree of Senegal in West Africa. There are several other species in Madagascar, and they produce edible fruit, which has the highest pectin content of virtually any known fruit. In fact, we just had an analysis of Adansonia digitata fruits. Of the fruit pulp, it was 56% pectin. But not only that, we believe it's a unique pectin, which would be extremely useful for everything from baby foods to even tablets and the coatings of tablets. So completely useful binding product. And there's one of the fruits that's just hanging up there. Okay, this right here is Delinix regia, of course a legume with an edible bean. This right here is Spondylus, which is in Euphorbiaceae, the hog plum. And then being marauded by a bunch of kids and dancing for them. Moringa. So John, you asked about moringa. There are several interesting perspectives to put on moringa because there is an Israeli professor. He was from Beersheba at Ben Gurion University in Beersheba, Israel. His name is Dov Pasternak. Thank you, thank you. Dov Pasternak is particularly interesting because he did instead of just pretend. So he went to Niger many years ago, gave up his academic complacency, and he went and tried to do something in the field. One of the things he did is he discovered that there were great plantations, natural plantations of ziziphus. Ziziphus that produced a very small fruit, the juju, but this is the native Ziziphus mauritania. He took cultivars from India, grafted them onto those rootstocks, and within 6 months they were producing spectacular fruit. This is the amazing story. So he took a basically unproductive wild growth of plants, used those after coppicing to be the natural rootstock for an improved cultivar. Genius, super disease resistant, super drought resistant. He started producing fruit that 6 years afterward is now a major fruit producing element in this country. It's win-win-win. So with moringa that we are speaking about, moringa oleifera, is the oil of Bentry. It also has tons, it's all called the horseradish tree. It is not as resilient or as drought resistant as these pachyderm plants, as I'll call them, with the huge trunks. This is Moringa druhardii. It's south of Tuliar, Madagascar. We take a trunk like this, graft the moringa onto it, we have super drought resistance, the capacity to absorb large amounts of water and store it, but then we have a food producing mechanism for some of the roughest desert areas in the world. And there's other species of moringa. This is just one of the interesting bark facial mass that you see through Madagascar and southern Africa. This right here in the ginger family, these are the Afromomums, and there's several species of Afromomum all through tropical Africa related to other gingers. They're also known as the grains of paradise as a condiment. A little chameleon, we'll just go through these quickly. Now the vibrant and colorful markets there are a place of sleuthing and discovery. For me, this was a place to look for a couple things. Vigna subterranea, which is the you know what the cowpea is, or you know what the, we call it cowpea, right, or black-eyed pea. That's Vigna unguiculata. Okay, we'll keep going here. There it is right there. Vigna subterranea, this is the groundnut, which is raised in many parts of arid Africa, virtually unknown in the rest parts of the world. Bambara. Just look it up on the web and you'll discover the merits of this incredible plant. There's somebody shelling it. There's the unshelled and the shelled, but these grow underground like a peanut. This right here is Flacortia indica. You know it, right? It grows beautifully in Madagascar in the driest areas. Okay, we'll go through this quickly. Oh, this is spectacular, Dioscorea. So we're looking for all types of fruit, hence it's not just a fruit talk, I'm sorry. But these are roots of the Dioscoreas. Now the Dioscoreas are found all over the world. They're actually a monocot, even though they look like they have regular type of leaves, not grass-like. They're a spectacular source of food, and yet no one cultivates these. They're only dug up in the wild. And here I was ecstatic to find these growing on a landslide area on the side of the road. There's one of the tubers. This is an aroid. So aroids have, again, splendid potential. Keep going. A corn tree. This is the aroid right here. So it's Typhonodorum lindleyanum. It has been used for its starchy bulb, starchy corm, and also because it produces huge fruits that are laden with seeds, which are actually edible if properly, shall we say, properly prepared, because they have to leach some of the properties out. Here's one of my collection chambers. What's interesting about this, if you back up, this plant right here is now being so-called sustainably harvested by, help me, what is the name of the company? Clarins. Clarins in France. So they're using this bark right here, which is said to be an incredible facial humificant. And then there's another bark which I'll show you here. Not that one, those are fruits of, okay. So this plant right here is one of the case in points of this intellectual thievery that's going on. And I'm going to explain why I call it intellectual thievery. This plant is called handy, Neobegua mahafalensis. The other plant is Vanilla madagascariensis. But what is this? This is an aphrodisiac which has been used for literally centuries in southern Madagascar. I learned about it because my driver was really angry. He had a mistress. He wasn't drinking his handy. He told me the story. I started researching about it. Discovered that a Swedish company went down there, found out this information, applied for patents in 100 countries in the world, claiming that the traditional knowledge wasn't valid, but they had discovered something novel about it which made their discovery relevant. This is biopiracy. I'm not into biopiracy. What I want to see is people use products but don't make false claims about your so-called advantageous knowledge, because this is a case in point. And here's the collection of it right here. Okay, we'll just move through this quickly. The Didieriaceae, these plants aren't really imagined to be edible, but when you imagine the lemurs, all these little primates that live down in Madagascar, the ones that still remain, they live in these kind of scrub thorn forests, and they actually eat the leaves of these, and I tried them, and they're quite acidic and delicious. Oh, look at this treasure. This is Dolichos fonzi. Now, you know the lab bean. Lab is quite common in Eastern Asian markets. They eat the fruit. This is unknown. I can't even find two references on the internet about Dolichos fonzi, and yet this is a tuber growing in a hot, dry, seasonally desert area, which is as delicious as a watermelon. And we don't know anything about it. So, Nina, you got to start genetic modification here so we can feed the world. Okay, let's keep going. Then we go into a temperate zone. This is in Colorado. Fruit everywhere, they abound. Small fruits in most of the temperate zones. If we look at the arboreal parts of the world, the north, the Siberia. Next summer I hope to go to Siberia to study all types of fruits and, well, quite a few other projects in the former Soviet Union. Now we're going through some temperate fruits. This is in Japan. This is the Acacia quinata. It's kind of insipid, but I mean it is a spectacularly beautiful fruit. Okay, and this right here is Lonicera. Perhaps you know the Lonicera. It's a honeysuckle berry. These are cultivars which were produced at a research station in Romania by a friend of ours by the name of Michael Coleman. And this right here is Archostaphys ubi-ursi? Yes. Okay, this is a little fruit that grows up in the Rocky Mountains in the western U.S. Fragura virginica, the little wild strawberry. Absolutely spectacular little fruits. Just go through this relatively quickly. A collection of Grosellas. Okay, now this right here is another treasure. Nobody has heard of this thing. This is Apios priceana, this plant which is creeping on this. It's an endangered species in the United States. There's only 2 or 3 known locations. I was down in a location last summer, and I actually drove, what, 400 miles in 6 hours to get to this location because I spent an entire day looking at another one, and finally I found the treasure. Why is it of interest? It's a United States native legume. It produces a sweet edible tuber that could have rivaled any tuber crop that we could have produced, and yet the conservationists aren't doing anything about it. I mean, they want things to be rare, is my kind of deep down feeling. It is incredible food potential. So the only way it's going to get used is if people like Ron Hira or Jim or somebody has an economic means to start propagating it and growing it, because these are treasures for the future. Yeah, there's the beans. They weren't ripe. I would have had seeds and I would have given them to all of you. Okay, and there it is right there. Let's keep going. This right here, none of you have probably seen this. This is the Etlangeras. Etlangeras are a source of incredible new spices, aromatic principles that are in the ginger family. The flower that you see is what we call geophytic, so it's coming right out of the ground, and that's the flower cluster. And then if you keep moving there, this is what results: a type of a fruit, a fruiting body with the little fruit segments, which have the seed and a flesh in them. And we'll go through these. Here's another species which is flowering, Elangera coccinea, Elangera, I don't remember the species. This one is an unidentified species, according to an expert, a new species that we collected in Borneo. This is another one that's possibly new in Borneo. And this is a Hornsteadia, another genus of those type of gingers. Go through this quickly here. Amazing things that no one ever studies these things. There's like 2 or 3 people in the world who are Etlangeria experts. Apart from that, they just inhabit botanical gardens and that's it. And some of them, their fruit actually tastes like chicken soup, if that sounds conceivable. Others are quite fragrant. Others, I mean, this was a debate that I had with Irina. I said, I think it tastes like chicken soup. She did not believe it tasted like chicken soup. Others are more ginger-like. Others have just, you know, certain aromas. Here's how it fruits in the jungle. And there's a big fruit right there, about this big. Okay, and the Hornsteadia, the resultant luscious fruit. Once you peel those segments, and take that off, you get this, and it tastes like a tangerine. Isn't that, okay? More Hornsteadias, more. Okay, this is a Plagiostaces. It was called by one botanist the ugliest flower that existed on the planet because it's one slimy, hideous mass with an edible fruit that follows. I think, Irina? Right here, this is the resultant fruiting body. Those are actually delicious, but it's a taboo to take them back to your own house. Just take them to other people. I don't know because it's so ugly or what. Here's the plant. This is in Sarawak, Borneo. Okay, and here's some more Elangera fruits. There's all types of unusual monocots which produce edible fruits, which are virtually unknown. This one is particularly delicious. Again, tastes like a lime, mandarin, tangelo all mixed into one, but quite sweet. There's the fruity body right there, and you just pick the segments out, and then they're perfectly palatable once you wash off all the stuff. Mango. So we're going to go through a few mangoes right now. This is Mangifera fetidissima. Of course, the Mangifera group, there was a man who had done a great monograph on this, Kostermans. Did you know Kostermans? Yeah, so he knew all the guys in the live. I just knew it from his monograph. But so we started following the mango path, and there are about 68 species in Borneo of mangoes, which means there's a lot of excitement. We'll just keep going, Irina. This is Mangifera pajam. Now this is quite a large fruit, but it's not as large as they get because going up the Kelabit River, it is said that some of the Iban people have selections which get up to 8 pounds. Fiberless fruits that weigh 8 pounds on this delicious mango here. Here's another view of it. This is Mangifera cassia, a white-fleshed mango. And then the durians. So the durians are said to belong now in the Malvasia, which is kind of like the hibiscus family. They used to call them Bombaceae in the Bombaceae. And this particular one is Durograviolens. This is another example. Now I have a story about this one because Ron used to traipse around in these jungles in Borneo, but like, what, 40 years ago, Ron? And I called him up, talked to him one night. I was in Sarawak, and I said, do you know where I can find a red-fleshed Durograviolens? And he said, well, if you go there, go about a mile, and then you walk back in the woods about a mile, After 40 years, is this possible? It was true. This is where we found them. This is Dureo oxalanus, and this is more of the Dureo graveolens. This is probably a Dureo testudiarum. So there's huge biodiversity of durians in this part of the world. A very thin flesh one, and then a very, very orange flesh is probably Dureo cutogenesis in the oxalanus again. And then this is one of the most perfumed of the Dureos. We had personal experience with a pickup truck that had about 2 bushels of them in the back, and people would walk and they would like smell it from the other side of the road and they'd start walking that way. And then wasn't it the suitcases were also perfumed for several weeks?
The suitcases, and for
Yeah,
about 2 weeks we
incredible
enjoyed
aroma.
it.
It's actually palatable. The flesh is very sweet. It's called Dureo dulcis. Looks like a giant lychee, but as you'll see with this passport picture ahead, that's how big they are. And it's just absolutely amazing. There's a book which is called The Fruits of Bruni Dar es Salaam, actually written by a man that I think Ron again knew. His name is Tony T. And for me, when I first got this book, this is probably 8-10 years ago, I just looked at it and I considered it a mysterious, mythical creature. It wasn't until I was driving down a road south of Limbang that I saw the first ones and my heart almost stopped because I had been waiting so long to see one of these. And here's a Dureo feast, which you can see how happy she is. Other things to do with Dureo testudiarum. We try to get mentally ill people to work with us too, and this one did prove to be almost that. This is the type of cauliflowerous flower that we have in these. This is not a Dureo which you're about to see. It's probably a Cerro Dureo. We don't really have a true classification, but it's one of the most beautiful fruits you'll ever see. Look at that. I mean, to see these type of things growing in the jungle, it's just like amazing. And there's the red arrow around the flesh, around the seed, and I actually tried those. This is what we would call a stump-producing species, probably a Dureo testudiarum. But again, there's so much mixing in this group of Dureos that you really can't just look at a fruit and classify it half the time. There's how they're growing. Cauliflower's right off the stem. Another one that we found in one of the jungle areas. This is actually a variety called Kingford, a very yellow one. Now, switching quickly to another group, the Nepheliums. Now this is the rambutans that we're quite familiar with, but when you get into the rambutan and its related species in Borneo, you're in for a ride because it's absolutely astounding. I was driving along north of Mount Kinabalu, and I saw from the road what looked like piles of black eggs, and so I turned the car around and went in, and I looked at this thing and I just was astounded. It was almost charcoal black, and it is a fruit. So I've never seen anything like this before. I still cannot believe it. So what do I want to do? I want to give grafting material to the right people. Maybe Frankie's in Hawaii or something. We'll get a couple sticks to him and he can grow. So this is what they look like inside. Of course, the regular type of arrow around the seed. We can go through these quite quickly here. This is another one. This is Nephelium rambutan aki is the species, but some of these are just huge. And then the yellow rambutan variety. And then this is another rambutan aki that is green. So I mean, the diversity doesn't even, it seems like somebody painted all of these things. Because you're not expecting and you find this. Astounding. This is Nephelium robustum. The leaves are about 1/2 meter, up to about 50 centimeters long, and the fruits, well, you can see they're about that big. It's spectacular. This was brought to me by Voon Voon Ho. These are at the Voon Voon Ho research station that he founded 20 years ago, just to tell you where proper research goes. A man toiled for 20 years building a spectacular tropical fruit collection, and the government decides not to fund it anymore, so it's like in ruins. It's astounding. I mean, a world priceless resource. We heard about the institute last year in northern Russia that was a small fruit collection that they were letting go waste. It happens all over the world. And yet the same government is going to spend 40 million euros. It's politically, great political finesse there to get the publicity to discover underutilized crops when they have them being underappreciated right under their noses. This right here is Nephelium mangai. This is almost extinct fruit in many places, a completely new Nephelium species. There's more photos that was done by Irina. And then, I don't know if you know about these. Have you ever heard of willow-beas? Anyone?
Yeah.
Jim knows about willow-beas. In fact, it was most likely the great fruit guy, Bill Whitman, who said this was his favorite fruit in the entire world. And yet, this and an encompassing group of other Apocynaceae, this is in the milkweed family. So these milky vines are virtually unknown, but some of the most spectacular fruits you'll find. I believe there's upwards of 60 species in Southeast Asia of willow-beas. In tropical Africa, there are another group called the Landolfias, which there was a book written by Paul Noren and Roy Dansford on the Landolfia. Okay, we'll move through this. This is a part of Tommy T's book. A pear is not a pear, he says. It's a mononunagon. Upside down. And then we have this one, but I'll show you some real pictures from my experience. So this right here is Willowbea coriaceae, one of 4 species that we collected. Spectacular. This is with Runbunho. This is called Willowbea sarawatkensis. If you eat the flesh, it tastes like tang. I mean, it is that sweet, that acidic, all at the same time. So it's like eating tang right out of the jar, but juicy. And they grow on these big, huge vines. This is Willowbea angustifolia. This is up at South Tenham. This is where I had what would you call it, a séjour. That's what they call it when you have a little mini unexpected vacation. I came down with chikungunya fever. So I drove back from Kota Kinabalu, got back to Temen, and when I went to get out of my car, I was like, what the hell is the matter with me? So I got back to my bed and I laid down, and the next morning I was like this. And I walked over with a blanket on me to the doctor, and he says, how long you been here? I said, I've been here, I've been in Borneo for about, 2 weeks. He said, how long have you been here? I said, 8, 10 days. He said, this is what you got, and he holds a little paper. Chikungunya fever, it's a virus that affects the joints. And I apparently healed up pretty quickly, but they were having an epidemic in Tenem while I was there, so I got it. And I ate the 8 ringgit Kentucky Fried Chicken menu with the soup with the 2 fish balls for a week. Oh, I hate that. This is the Willowbea angustifolia again. And here's eating Willowbea sarawatkensis in the car. And then the treasure, there's a fleeting moment, you know, you can't focus on these things very well when they're 200 yards away in the jungle, so that's what you get. And look at this one. This is Willowbea elmeri. You're going to see the inside of it in a minute. Like white cotton candy, but tangy, sweeter than sweet, and completely unknown. There's how big it is. Now this is the buttress of one, you know, the huge dipterocarps in the forest of Borneo are underappreciated because, well, maybe they're overappreciated. They come all down and make Chinese woodwork with them. And this right here is part of the adventure, finding this vine growing vertically up this huge dipterocarp. You see the red fruits, so the question is, what are they? This is a ficus species. We'll get to it. There's as good as my camera would do at the moment. And then we bring them down, and that's how it is. So about that big of a round ball. They were hard, but most of the ficus species are edible, if not all so wonderfully palatable. But there's quite a few delicious ones. This one didn't ripen up in time for me to actually give it a test, so I can't claim it. There's tons and tons of wild figs all through the old world tropics that are edible. Now we're getting into the family Moraceae, so the mulberry family. This right here is Artocarpus camasonius, which is known as the seeded breadfruit. Its range is all the way through, from Borneo all the way through New Guinea, right up to the, basically, the western part of New Guinea. More figs. And this is Artocarpus sericicarpus. Artocarpus sericicarpus is called, what do they call it there? Penang? These Malaysian names throw me for a loop. Anyway, if you touch the fruit, it's kind of latex sticky. It's this kind of almost bright yellow-orange color. We'll keep going. There's her face next to all of them, and then her hand next to all of them, and then me holding them. And this is another tree. This is Artocarpus rigidus. There's the fruit on this. The tubercles are rigid, hence rigidus, green fruit. And then this is Artocarpus anisophyllate. So anisophyllus as having anise type of leaves, which is rare in the artocarpus. And here's the fruit with very interesting drupes inside. They're segmented sweet, sour taste. There they are again. And then some from the collection here in Tenham and that I just talked about because that's where I was hanging out. This right here is the, what is it called? This is Artocarpus odoricinus.
Maprang or Maprang? Maprang, isn't it?
Not Maprang, it's called, begins with a T. Okay, well, forget it, well, I'll remember. There they are hanging up. And here's warning, don't take my fruits. And there's the trees. And then other spectacular ones. You probably never saw this one. This is Artocarpus commando, a little tiny one, and that's completely right. There it's on the tree. There it's in the hand. And there's Artocarpus saurocensis, an extremely rare Artocarpus, which I had to go back 3 times until they ripen. And there's the inside. These arrows which taste like marshmallows. And this is Artocarpus elasticus. Here's off the tree, in the tree, on the ground, rotting. And Artocarpus tamarind, the bark cloth tree. Another spectacular fruit. Oh, look at this beauty. This is one of the most, I mean, can you see, I see people trying to wiggle around me. I can walk over here. And it looks like a, if you go back to the Middle Ages, it looks like the things you swing around, except they're soft as they can be. A mace. It looks like a mace. But the fruit, what you see, the orange segments are the pollinated segments, whereas the little green ones are the unpollinated, undeveloped ones. We'll have more here. It's called Prinia limpata. It's the most beautiful fruit in the world. Unfortunately, it's not shippable because they melt. They're worse than strawberries, but they're delicious. There's the proof. And this right here, I found this in the jungle with my daughter down in Sarawak, and I was just amazed. It had characteristics which were different. The tubercles were able to pull them off, which wasn't happening with the other Artocarpus. So this is called Parartocarpus velenosa. The seeds are said to be poisonous as well as the latex, but the fruit is completely edible. So there's the tree, there's me trying to get the fruit out, and there's some of the success. And there's the inside, sweet, sour, delicious. This, I don't know what it is. It could be a Salacia, but I don't know. We found this spectacular vine, which the locals called in Malaysian deer eyes, because they have a little round seed inside of them. You can imagine, pulling an eye out of a deer once you had killed it. But they're delectable, tasting a little bit like watermelons. And then this right here is just Dimnocarpus longan, but it's known as the Kuching cat eye. So it's a particularly unique variety of longan. And then this was a discovery round. This is the one I sent a photo to you of. Genetically speaking, the mangosteen basically looks like this around the world. They have this 6-segmented bud scar, whereas we found this one, which they called a male mangosteen, because it had kind of a protuberance at the end. And if you look at the bud scar, there's 8 or 9 on the bud scar. It was almost twice the size of any mangosteen that I'd ever seen. It was coming from a little village. So here's where the proof is in the pudding of discovering genetic diversity, even when the general rule of thumb is it doesn't exist. It always exists. I still think there's a pink one out there in my fantasies. This right here, these are they call them the Chinese olives, which is a misnomer because it's not an olive and it's certainly not Chinese. These are canariums. The canariums are a spectacular fruit in the Burseraceae family, the same as the bursera or even the copal tree or the frankincense tree in Comiferaceae. And so these right here are an unusual fruit because they're not sweet, they're kind of oily. You put them in hot water to soften them, and then they're spectacular, they're delectable. You don't boil them, you just put them in hot water to soften them. Just a show of Alocasia macrorrhiza, Borneo giant. Garcinia forbaceae. Uncula, this is in the Lauraceae family, related to avocados. The uncula is, again, another strange fruit. I don't know how you discover these things, but people do in want of creativity. You have to put them in hot water, otherwise they have a tendency to be too acrid. So you put them in hot water and they become completely sweet and delicious. There's 2 varieties known on the island. This is a unique fruit, Cometzia pinnata, and they call it a crystal fruit, which is a cheap name, but its origin is probably New Guinea, but it's spread throughout the South Pacific, yet It's virtually not cultivated anywhere that I know as a commercial fruit, except in those areas. Lymphoxanthe Salata, not a lot of meat on the arrow of the seed, but tremendous production. This is the Bucarias. The Bucaria is a group in the Euphorbiaceae. There's tons of different kinds. They call them the Tompoids, T-A-M-P-O-I. They're very, very acidic, but they're quite sweet too. And there's just more diversity of them. This is another Garcinia forbaceae. Strange papayas. This is long papayas. Again, finding genetic things all over the world. Carica papaya did not originate in Malaysia, but somebody was selecting them, or this strain came up and someone was growing it. This is Delania subfruticosa, an edible leaf. So edible leaves in the tropics are a big subject for me because I feel that leaves have huge potential for human nutrition. This right here is Metroxylon warburgii, one of the so-called sago palms. This is in Samoa. I have to do the drink. 1 second. Any questions? I think we've gone through 200 pictures, don't you?
When you try all these, have they ever not said well?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, first of all, this is important. This is very important because you get some really stupid responses when people tell you something's edible. So you try to feed it to them first. I was in Vietnam. Ron, this is a good one for you. I was in Vietnam in a place called Sapa up in the north, and I'll show you a picture of it. And I bought it, this woman was selling all these roots. And so I started talking to the locals through my translator, and they said, oh yeah, this is good in chicken soup. Well, hell, it was good in chicken soup, maybe as your last meal. It was Aconitum cheesemanii. You know what that Aconitum is? Monkshood. It's like deadly, completely deadly. So what they really do with that root, thanks I didn't go home and start cooking, is they bruise the root and rub it on them when they're having traditional fights, because it numbs them. But you don't want to put it in your mouth.